Hello, welcome to Newscentre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The government's Make in India initiative has transformed India from a mere consumer market to a global manufacturing powerhouse. The initiative's measures that streamline regulations has driven manufacturing in all sectors by attracting foreign investment. A government report accessed by CNBC-TV18 highlights that global auto majors like Suzuki and Honda, as well as homegrown brands, have already used the incentives at hand to make in India and also consider India an export hub. That's not all. Global tech, pharma and even fashion brands have been betting on India, boosting their exports as well. To take this discussion forward, I'm now joined by Kalyani, Chairman and Managing Director at Bharat Forge. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Mr. Kalyani, let me begin by asking you, would you say that since the Make in India initiative was launched way back in 2014, today India has reached its breakout moment in manufacturing?
Yeah, I think it's a point of inflection that we have reached as a country. And with the growth that we see in the GDP projected going forward, you know, it's like what happened in Germany after World War II, what happened in Japan, what has happened in Korea and lately in China. You know, this is India's moment in the manufacturing sector. Already we are seeing very steep growth that is taking place in the export of manufactured products. The automotive industry is growing at a fairly fast clip. The defense industry is now open to the private sector. That's creating a lot of opportunities. And you have all this work that's going on infrastructure. So clearly, it's a big point of inflection.
Right. Give us a sense of some of the sectors, Mr. Kalyani, and you've been on several government committees to encourage manufacturing through incentives and also through non-fiscal incentives. Give us a sense of areas where you expect the industry to put up more capacity. What about specifically on the auto sector front? We are an auto sector manufacturing powerhouse. Exports have been rising for many of the companies. Give us a sense of how we are likely to see capacity expansion going forward.
You know, if you look at the auto sector and of course, along with the auto sector, the auto component sector, and if you look at between now and 2047, which is, let's say, the benchmark date for India at 100, I would expect the auto sector to reach somewhere in the region of 30 million four-wheelers compared to the 3.5, 4 million that we are at today. So we are talking about 8x growth in 25 years. And the component sector will have almost something like a 12x growth in the next 25 years. So it's going to be, the growth is going to be pretty quick and pretty fast. The problems with growth are you're going to make sure that you have enough talent available, skilled manpower available, because the entire growth is going to come with different technologies, different technical processes. There's a lot of electrification that is going on in the automotive industry. Manufacturing is going to get digital. And, you know, we have to make sure that we get that part of the system right.
Right. In this challenging geopolitical environment where there are two wars going on, there are superpower rivalries at play, how can India continue growing in a sustained manner, and what's the role that India can play in global manufacturing?
You know, there are a couple of reasons why India is going to play a fairly big role in global manufacturing. One is in the Western world, whether it's Europe or whether it's the United States, there's a huge shortage today of manpower, trained manpower. It's very difficult if you want to set up a plant, very difficult to find trained manpower, trained engineers for that kind of a thing. So a lot of people are now moving their production out of their countries into India. Earlier it used to go to China, but I think that story is kind of moving and shifting towards India and some of the other Southeast Asian countries. I think with whatever Prime Minister Modi has done to position India as a country where investments are welcome, we have our Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, traveling around, trying to get industries to come and invest here, trying to source things here. I think, if you just look at the data on exports of manufactured products, we are seeing a growth of something like 20-25% year on year taking place. So clearly, the tailwinds are there. I think one issue that still needs to be sorted out is reforms at the level of states. Some of the states are doing better than other states. But I think if the states can join the bandwagon of the center in reforming things that are required to reform and get the manufacturing sector more competitive, you will see a much faster growth in this sector.
Right. Mr. Kalyani, I'd also like to ask you about the PLI schemes. All the measures on the ease of doing business front that we have undertaken since 2014, including those 13 or 14 PLI schemes, how have they contributed to manufacturing and setting up of capacity? Because many of the capacities are yet to come up because of those PLI schemes as well.
See, most of the PLI schemes are focused towards the new technologies. I want to get a PLI if I am expanding my forging business, for example. Okay. If you are going to make components for electric vehicles, you're going to make those kind of things, the PLI scheme is applicable. We have also applied because as any industry who is in the supply chain of automotive, you have to start looking at the whole electrification strategy, the EV strategy, what components you would make for those kind of products. So those products will come under the PLI scheme. And that's a good scheme because I think you can take better and bigger bets with that scheme instead of taking the whole risk head on yourselves, because nobody knows how the EV game is going to get played out. You heard in the US, the big auto OEMs are now pulling back on their EV investments because somehow the demand momentum is not as high as they thought. But PLI scheme helps
that
there.
Indeed is an important point. Right. My final question to you would be, what are some of the challenges that you see here onwards? Of course, India's image from an economy where there is very strong consumer demand to one which can be a manufacturer for the world, that is the image we have today. But in terms of our 2047 goals, how does India grow from here? The challenges that you see, and also the rivalry with China. We don't see a clear policy of any country vis-a-vis China right now. US, UK, it seems to be issue-based. The relationships are dynamic. How do you think we should take this competition from China and grow sustainably in a safe manner over the next 20 to 30 years?
India has no options but to focus on innovation and innovative manufacturing. We can't do manufacturing the old ways. We have to bring in digital technology in our manufacturing. We have to innovate new products. We have to do things exactly what the Atmanirbhar Bharat philosophy says. And once you do that, then I think in the next 10, 12 years, you will be ahead of most of these countries. And India has the potential to get ahead of most of these countries just on its innovative capability. Today, we are innovating for OEMs around the world. We're not innovating for ourselves. If we just change that whole scenario and start innovating for ourselves, then I think the whole picture will be very different.
Right. Innovation is the key for sustained growth. Thank you very much, Mr. Kalyani, for joining us on the program and giving us your view on the breakout moment for Indian manufacturing. We're going to take a short break at this point, but when we return, we will continue this discussion on India's manufacturing ambitions with Manish Sharma of Panasonic and also J.D. Patil of L&T. Welcome back. You're watching Newscentre, and we are discussing India's breakout moment in manufacturing. Now, be it automobiles, be it garment manufacturers, or be it pharmaceuticals or electronics for that matter, India is becoming a manufacturing powerhouse, and we have an ambition to become a manufacturer in niche technologies and technologies of the future as well. We are making great investments in a semiconductor ecosystem as well, and becoming a big supplier of chips in the world. Let me go across now to Jayant Patil, member Executive Committee of Management at L&T, also advisor on defense and aerospace to the company. Manish Sharma, Chair, Electronics and White Goods Manufacturing Committee of Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, also Chairman at Panasonic Life Solutions. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Manish Sharma, how do you see the electronics manufacturing footprint really expanding in India over the next 10 years or so? According to your own market analysis at Panasonic and also at FICCI, which are the sectors within electronics which are going to see the highest capacity addition, highest manufacturing footprint in the next 10 years?
Electronics, in my opinion, happens to be the biggest opportunity for the country, as we know that majority of imports, if at all, come out of next to, say, the crude imports is the electronics. And if you have to quantify the current scale, while electronics kind of cuts across a variety of different applications, but essentially it is about consumer electronics, telecom, say IT and its hardware, and medical electronics, power electronics. So electronics is cutting across, and the current scale of electronics consumption in the country is roughly about $100 billion. And the ambition of the country is to take it up to $400 billion in next 6 to 7 years' time. Is that how do we not merely continue to assemble goods in abundance? While that has happened methodically in last 8 to 9 years of consistent effort, which started off with phased manufacturing programs, which essentially created a duty differential for the local disabilities to go away when it comes to finished goods. But I think the challenge now is that from a current level of 23 to 24% of domestic value addition, which is essentially the manufacturing of components which happen in the country. You spoke in the opening comments about semiconductors, but the other components also, how do we ensure that that backward integration happens in the country, which logically will create competitiveness on a global scale with rising economies of scale happening in next few years for us to be globally competitive and then look at exporting also. And therefore, I think the immediate enabler of PLI, which is impacting a lot of sectors, is playing a crucial role. There are enough data points already starting to emerge that how PLI, for example, in air conditioners, there is significant amount of electronics has scaled up backward integration from a 20% to 45% in just about a couple of years. So I believe essentially three factors. First one is, which is consistently getting fueled by the aspirations of our people, their understanding going beyond initial cost of acquisition to total cost of ownership. And second is increasing backward integration. And third is ability, our ability to become globally competitive and then start to export in next few years' time will make us competitive in next 7 to 8 years' time.
All right, let me now go across to Mr. Jayant Patil. Mr. Patil, thank you very much for joining us. Speaking specifically about defense and how it will contribute to India's manufacturing footprint, we're already seeing exports exceed 16,000 crores. Give us a sense of how the manufacturing story has evolved over the last few years and where we are today.
Parikshit, this is a story which is constantly being moved up. And from that 16,000 crores of export that actually happened, we are today moving gradually into moving towards the 25,000 crores 2 years later. Obviously, for any defense industry, the in-house markets, which are quite sizable, and the indigenous manufacture today, we know is roughly about a little more than 1 lakh crores. So 100,000 crores. In addition to that, this 25,000 crores that we are talking about makes it quite large. Now, what to my mind is extremely important is not just these numbers, but the multiplier that it provides through our SMEs to the Indian defense sector. So we truly see a value content for the industry to be something of the order of 4 to 5 times of this 125,000 crores. And that's quite a sizable part of when we talk of the GDP. And this is essentially where the industry provides to some extent, call it the sustenance beyond the indigenous market or the indigenous acquisition. Second, it also positions us to be the sort of builder for the nation, for the nation as well as for the world.
Mr. Patil, I'd like to ask you about how do you see the contribution of defense in our manufacturing GDP go up in the next few years? What are some of the platforms or components, defense components, which you will see getting indigenized in India in the horizon of the next 5 to 10 years, for example?
Parikshit, if I have to look at the defense sector alone, currently there's almost every warship that is getting produced in the country is being done within the country. Aircrafts is the next. The fighters as well as the helicopters are now happening within the country. And I don't think there's anything that India will import in let's say, next 5 to 10 years of time. Now that Air Force has made the announcement that the next 100 light combat aircraft and to follow after about 5 to 7 years would be the advanced medium combat aircraft. So we now see a very sustained kind of volume in major platforms, which are both the naval as well as the air. And Army, in terms of the total acquisition budget, today 94% of Army's acquisition budget is from Indian industry. Now, when we start looking at this dynamics, the way it has changed over the last couple of years, everything that the country needs is now going to be done here. And this entire value coming from industry with the multiplier, I see in terms of the manufacturing GDP, which today is roughly about 14% of the GDP, a sizable content, because at the national GDP level, defense manufacturing would contribute typically a little more than that 1.5–2%. If we look at 5 lakh crores compared to the little more than 350,000 crores. So that's a significant addition to the manufacturing GDP, which will come out of these numbers.
All right. Mr. Manish, let me come back to you. We see the likes of Apple, Samsung deepening their supply chain, manufacturing, and plans to export from India as well. But if we were to rise and compete to the likes of China, Vietnam, what more do we need to do in terms of incentives, in terms of ease of doing business, or sweetening the deal for some of the large global manufacturers?
Solution for this, I believe this is kind of work in progress for a while, and it has to be that way in the coming years also. And the essential actions which are required is for all the stakeholders to understand their responsibility clearly and work in tandem with each other. So I'll give you an instance, for example, of a very strategic category like air conditioners, the work which has happened in the recent past in the backdrop of the PLI schemes being announced. So the approach which we have to take is, in the first instance, of the majority of consumption which happens in the country, the assembly has to happen in the country, which is what Mr. Patil also mentioned for defense equipment. That has started to happen for majority of consumer appliances and including mobile phones. Now, the second challenge is that how do we improve global competitiveness? As I said, it will only happen when we do component manufacturing in the country. And that has started to happen. The local value addition has started to increase. Now, in order for us to become globally competitive and also increase export, two things are necessary. One is we have to increase and improve our outreach to consumption-led economies. And that may include measures like creating the right free trade agreements with them, or the comprehensive economic partnership which we have created. And industry has to ensure that, in a very objective manner, that is leveraged. And the second thing is that multinational companies have to play a significant role here so that they put the local subsidiaries in the country in the global supply chain footprint of their global organization. And in that process, shift the exports which are currently happening out of geographies, whether into Asia, countries like Malaysia, the traditional exporters like Thailand, Vietnam, including China. While the economies of scale continue to build and the competitiveness continues to build in the country, how do we look at shifting some of those exports to our country by way of convincing the headquarters that the quality and the cost which will be delivered out of India will be equally competitive. So as I said, this is work in progress, but I think we are walking that path, and we will reach there in next few years' time.
All right, my final set of questions to both you and Mr. Jayant Patil. Manish Sharma, in terms of the private capex taking off, yes, it is coming in, but how do we make sure that private capex grows in a sustained manner, and especially the sectors that you track under the FICCI, electronics and white goods industry? What are the sectors where you will see that private capex taking off?
Happen in variety of segments, and there's a structured program, as I mentioned, cutting across electronics, textiles, leather and footwear, including big opportunities like fishery and new segments which are evolving like drones and stuff. So I think it will cut across several sectors. The current capacity utilization on an average is roughly about 74% of the survey which has happened in the recent quarter. The sentiment, including the order books, etc., is very, very positive. So I believe that there will be a situation in next 2 to 3 years of time where there will be an exponential growth which will start to happen of new capacity creation. So I think the timing of every sector might be slightly different, but overall, the situation is such that we are averaging at about 75% of capacity utilization currently.
Right. Mr. Patil, in the defense sector, finally to you briefly, how do you see the capex investment, the private capex taking off, growing over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the capex investment in defense sector will pick up with these two corridors that we all know, the southern and the UP corridor, the Tamil Nadu and the UP corridor. And this is essentially where the larger the acquisition, the more the capital that goes in. If one looks at very sizable capital that actually has gone in the public sector undertakings as well as some of the major private sector companies, the subsequent capital now will come out of what truly starts happening in the component side of it. And far more of that is expected over next about 7-8 years. Today, of course, this is something which is happening to a certain scale, but as we export much more and of course build even more, because the budgets for the government, if one starts looking at growing typically at about 12 to 13% CAGR. So the next 7-8 years, if one looks at, the numbers will grow. And of course, every manufacturer, whether private or public, will need that investment to be made.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Patil, and also Manish Sharma for joining us on the program, telling us how you expect the private capex to take off in the industry sector-wise. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Newscentre. News and updates continue right here. Don't go anywhere.